Greetings, everyone. I'm excited to welcome Trevor Lee, co-founder and CEO at Myko. Trevor, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Ben.
Hey, great to have you on the show. We've talked, I think, we maybe met virtually a couple years ago. And so it's great to catch up here. But let's start off first. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so my background's originally in finance. I worked at the rating agency Fitch Ratings for a number of years, structured products, leverage finance, traditional financial job. Went to business school at Columbia, where really started transitioning more into entrepreneurship. So started learning some programming, doing some Python, interned at a number of different startups. And then once we graduated, started this company. Originally it was Genius Sheet, now Myko.
Okay. So, yeah, always different backgrounds with founders. In your case, like me, kind of a finance background, which is great to hear. And so, yeah, there's some history we kind of need to go through because your current venture is Myko. And normally I'd ask, hey, what is Myko offering? What products and services? But tell me the evolution of Myko because it didn't start off as Myko, correct?
Correct. So we originally connected because the first product we built, Genius Sheets, was an Excel add-in. So it helped people build better financial models. You could get data from systems like Quickbooks, bring it into Excel or Google Sheet in a more automated way. So we always had this big vision of utilizing big data and AI to help people make better decisions. So if we get 10,000 companies on our platform, use their real-time data to help them make better decisions. So we had that product, we had it in the market. At the time, my co-founder was still part-time CTO, and then we had one engineer on the team. We were building out the product and we had some early success. We actually wound up getting a partnership with Intuit as part of their developer growth program. So we were one of the companies in there. And we really wanted to accelerate how we were leveraging and using AI. And we saw in the summer of 2022, all of the different apps like Dolly were coming out where you could type in a prompt and get this really incredible image generating something. And so we were like, okay, if you could type in anything to a box and get an image, why can't you do analysis that way? Why can't you get the reports you need, the data you need? So we actually built our own language model completely from scratch and released it 2 weeks before ChatGPT came out. So it was still connecting the finance data, so the QuickBooks API. So you'd be like, compare my P&L from 2021 to my P&L 2022. Had a lot of early traction, a lot of like waitlist signups. People were using the product. And we really began to like search for product market fit at that time. And that's kind of what led us to where we are now, which is similar. So natural language over analytics and data, but specifically now we're doing for sales and revenue data. So instead of for finance data, we connect to systems like Salesforce and HubSpot, enable sales and revenue teams to get the data they need, analysis they need using kind of self-service AI. And so there's plenty I'm sure we can talk about in that pivot that we made, but that's kind of the general story arc.
Okay. Yeah. Because when those Genius Sheets, like right in my wheelhouse, right? Connect to accounting ERPs, pull data easily, report data easily. You'll maybe integrate it to your forecast model. And so tell us what happened there. Was accounting data just not sexy enough? Or, because now you're focused on a different data set, which is absolutely, almost as important, with CRM and sales data. So what happened? What did you see in the market or what were customers telling you that said, hey, we've got to ditch this accounting stuff and move elsewhere?
Yeah. So I think target buyers, specifically like SMBs and startups, really don't have a massive pain point when it comes to like analysis of their data. A lot of it is like more on the reconciliation side, the bookkeeping side. There's not that much like actual segmentation they need to do, quarter for quarter analysis at the earlier stages. So we were getting a lot of people who looked at a product and was like, oh, this is a really neat parlor trick. Like this is incredible. They didn't have a burning pain point around what we were solving when it came to like getting data out of QuickBooks using natural language. And so as we started evaluating and talking to more companies, we were like, okay, well, what if we go up market? What if we start selling to enterprise finance teams? They also, this wasn't their number one pain point. Their number one pain point was just like their forecasting process is a nightmare, or like all of their data is in Excel sheets that are spread out, right? Like the very basic like FP&A core functions were candidly such either a mess or were in the process of being fixed, that this was nowhere near one of their top priorities for something that they needed. So as we were kind of searching in organizations of who really does experience the same pain point, but who actually wants it, who's going to pay for it, and who's going to get on board first, I had a background working in some like business development, sales, and so I had felt the pain point of using Salesforce data. And it became evident to us that it just became a much better like go-to-market motion targeting the sales and revenue teams rather than finance teams.
Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing that insight because we know like financial data can be messy. We know, but I like when I look at CRM and sales data, that can be a really big black hole. I'd say
Yep.
more so than accounting data. And any lessons learned here that you'd like to share with the founder community as far as this pivot and just that feedback from the customers market that it seemed like people are like, hey, cool product, but not enough of a pain point. So what would you pass on to other founders who may be in similar situations? And it's right, it's so hard to interpret those signals. But what could you pass on here?
I think one of the even from the original Excel add-in Genius Sheets days, it was very much more of a vitamin than a painkiller. And part of that was around usage numbers. So we had some power users, but for the most part, A, there'd be long sales cycles because people would wait until like they really needed it or they just had a ton of free time. And then B, the usage, most people use it a couple times a month when they were doing a specific task. And it wasn't that useful outside of that. And so it made A, just retention hard, and then that sales process painful because it was solving such a kind of small subset of what they needed. So even now, the product is very much needed in the market. The question is it a standalone product that's painful enough? Or should it really be kind of like a bolt on to a larger company or another solution where it makes all the sense in the world?
Yeah, I appreciate that because it does seem like, yeah, we have to get accounting data out. We need to easily access it, slice and dice it. It's the, age old FP&A problem or accounting problem that we've all faced in finance. So yeah, appreciate that. So let's now talk about Myco. And would you say before we get into the kind of the product that it offers, would you say this is the revenue intelligence category? Because that seems to be kind of this new emerging category around sales, CRM intelligence. So what kind of category would you say you're in now?
Yeah, I think it's a mix between kind of the revenue intelligence and like general like BI tooling. I think a lot of the revenue intelligence tools in the market at least claim to have a lot more kind of predictive analytics capabilities, like proactively sending insights to users. We've tried to stay away from that, especially in the beginning, from the goal of not overpromising. So where we really excel is we create a almost mental map of your data, understand what the source of truth is for any question, so that when you ask the question, we can go combine data from multiple places and return it back to the user. So I think we're kind of right in that hybrid between those two. And then very carefully, like as we go to market, figuring out in these next steps, do we do more of the like push insights intelligence? Do we expand our data sources? Like thinking through what that go to market motion looks like.
Okay. And so what tell us what is the core offering with Myco?
Yeah. So the core offering right now is a chat based interface, whether our web app in Slack or even a Salesforce add in that users can talk to in order to get their data out of Salesforce. So if you think about what's some of the drawbacks of using BI software or Salesforce reporting, questions like quarter over quarter win rates by segment, right? Month over month analysis might require you to download 12 files and then put them in Excel, do the analysis. Those types of things where we're seeing a lot of success because we can be the quick and dirty, oh, you just put into a Slack bot and we give you exactly what you were looking for rather than you fumbling around with how do I use this report builder. So that's kind of the 1.0 where we are now. What's the kind of problem we're solving for people?
And so a lot of questions here because you're right. The CRM data is so important. It's one of the biggest SaaS data mistakes that I see. And actually, my blog post today was about four key SaaS finance data sources. So, of course, one of them, CRM data and bookings. So, if I was in finance, and of course, heavy user of CRM data, could I just type in a chat to say, what was my win rate in February, for example, like a simple question? And it could pop out an answer, say, all right, it was 10%.
That's exactly right. And so when people have their forecast categories in there as well, like all of those you can start building upon.
And then can it then, because you mentioned, all right, sometimes we have to pull this sales, we all love Salesforce reporting and pull this report, and then, bring it into Excel, do some VLOOKUPs, combine the data. So can it do some of that data manipulation? Whereas like if I said, yeah, tell me the win rate in this segment year over year, and that may require different tables. It knows enough to bring this data together.
Yeah, and where it becomes really powerful is when you ask that first question, you get the response back, and then you wanna say, like, "Actually, can you add a quarter to that?" Or, like, "Can you switch this segment with this segment and give me the same analysis?" Like, the ability to kinda iterate on that is where it becomes really powerful.
And can it yeah, so I'm very curious, can it also just feedback some raw data of like, I just want, hey, give me, 12
Yep.
months of, close one opportunity data. Can it just give you that raw data instead of me figuring out a Salesforce report?
Exactly, and so part of what we do during onboarding, I mentioned this kind of semantic layer, mental model of definition. You can program in either specific, like we want net retention to be calculated as, this divided by this. So when you ask our tool net retention, we know what you're talking about. But it's the same way where if you want to use terminology like a mid-stage deal is deal 3, 4, 5, anytime now you say mid-stage in our product, it knows what you're referring to. So we try and teach it your language.
Yeah, yeah, it makes a ton of sense. So let's talk ICP, or ideal customer profile. So who are you targeting for this app?
Yeah. So we're right now, we think the biggest ICP is going to be sales leadership. So VPs of sales, CROs, and then the second like tier down becomes like the RevOps and sales ops team that are the one actually like we get to the CRO, they're like, oh, this looks really cool. Schedule a meeting with my RevOps team to see if this actually can do what you say it can do and if this will save us time. So those are kind of the two personas when it comes to who we're selling into. And then the actual users are kind of the sales leadership, and then a lot of the like mid-level sales managers, right? You have a team of 7 AEs. You just want to understand how they're driving pipeline. You want to understand how win rates are trending. You're the one who's actually like just typing in these questions on a frequent basis. And so if we think about getting even more dynamic about how we think about ICP at a company level, for us, we're seeing a lot of success with kind of Series B, Series C companies, usually on the technology side. Typically, they're B2B, usually sales led, where they have some sort of velocity. So, not mega enterprise deals. You're not closing, not an organization where reps closing one deal a month for $1 million. Typically, deals that have a little bit more, organizations that have a little bit more velocity in their
Hmm.
sales motion do the best with our product. And then people that have a sales ops team. So you're a sales org of 30 total. You've got two RevOps resources that are fairly capacity constrained. We can plug in and almost act as like a third RevOps analyst to really help give them more bandwidth.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. And what about finance traction? Any finance folks using this when you get into the sales team?
We're starting to get some. So it typically starts with really RevOps and sales ops getting comfortable for it. And then we start expanding it to finance folks. We have some product folks, you have marketing folks. Really starts like branching across the organization once that level of internal comfort gets to a certain threshold.
Okay. Yeah. So sales teams out there, don't keep this secret from your finance team, because I would have been a heavy user, or could be, who knows, in the future, a heavy user of this, always pulling CRM data
Yeah.
and working with the sales ops manager. So that's awesome. So founding dates. So we probably, how would you, Genius Sheets, and then when was the pivot with Myko?
Yeah. So Genius Sheets founded August 2020. We really built our first AI layer October 2022. And then we raised our seed round from Khosla in April of 2023. And so the round from Khosla probably marks like the official like Myko creation, if you will. And then we spent a few months figuring out a new name, searching for that, and then ultimately did the rebrand sometime. I think it was late September, early October of last year, 2023.
Okay. Okay. So founded Genius Sheets August 2020. And then really we could say that the formal pivot was with that seed round in April of 23. Perfect. And then what about, do you have a headquarters location, or are you all virtual now?
So we're all virtual, mostly on the East Coast, though.
Okay. East Coast. And then what's your current team size?
We're 8 full time.
And what about the transition from Genius Sheets to now, kind of the same staff? Did you have to reconfigure org needs for Myko?
Since fortunately we really didn't have any capital before then, the team was small. It was me, my co-founder, and then we have one engineer who's been with us really for the last almost 3 years. Once we raised that round from Khosla for the new product, Myko, then is when we hired the rest of the team. So everybody's really been brought on since the pivot.
Okay. And did you raise with Genius Sheets, or was that bootstrapped?
Well, it was bootstrapped.
Okay. Okay. So okay. Okay.
I mean, we had raised, a little over 100,000 total for it from kind of like friends and family money and other things to
Yep.
keep us going. But we've kept the same, really it's the same corporate structure.
Okay. And then let's talk AR revenue. I assume are you revenue generating now with Myko?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
So
So pre-revenue. Okay.
we just did our fundraise announcement 2 weeks ago, at which point we've opened it up for kind of general availability. So
Okay.
now all the conversations we're having to get people onto the platform are around like, what are the contractual terms going to look like?
Okay. So are you jumping, did you have any sort of beta phase or like get users on, get feedback, or are you jumping right into, hey, let's sell this and start generating revenue?
Yeah. So for the last almost 6 months, we've been working with a few design partners in a beta phase where, they'd ask questions. We would get some of them right. We would get some of them not right, and then work to kind of improve it and really test it out, what our capabilities are, what our approach to solving this really broad problem is going to be. And so we waited almost a full year from the round to announce it until we were ready to, if we get you on, we're confident that we're going to give you the right answer.
Okay. And go to market motion right now, obviously before targeting finance and accounting, service providers, maybe now a whole different set. So going after that sales org. So tell me a little bit about how you're finding these design partners.
Yeah. So we were very fortunate to get a lot of inbound from the raise announcement. So fundraising from a big name VC obviously helps. We've tried to capitalize and continue on that by investing more into content. So I'll be doing a demo day in the next couple of weeks of just showcasing the product. We'll be doing some couple webinars coming up, just getting myself out there talking to other people. LinkedIn has been a very strong place for us. Even before the raise announcement, we were getting a fair amount of inbound from people just seeing our LinkedIn content. So that continues to be kind of one of the largest channels. And then really starting to think through a video, like, is there a way to effectively leverage video for B2B SaaS? And then B, intent-based signaling. So everybody on LinkedIn is talking about intent-based signaling. Can we find our target buyers of an organization in our ICP that might be hiring for a RevOps or SalesOps analyst? So they might be primed to, we know they have capacity problems where a tool like ours could be the perfect stopgap solution. And so maybe the one other anecdote I'll add in, because I think it's interesting from a founder perspective, when we originally released our first AI language model around the like big ChatGPT hype days, we got listed in a AI newsletter called Ben's Bites. A TikTok influencer picked us up, just found our link from that newsletter and did a video on us that went viral. We got like over 400,000 views. It actually crashed our website. And because our website wasn't linked in the video, the traffic was all coming from Google. So we had no idea why our website crashed, like why we were getting a crazy amount of traffic, because it just said like Google, like everyone's coming from Google. We were like, what is happening? So it wasn't until that night that we were like, oh, like someone actually did a TikTok video about us. And like we got very significant traction. And it was interesting because we got quite a few waitlist signups at that point from very massive enterprises. Like big companies were signing up through and finding us through TikTok, which I thought was fairly remarkable. So thinking about how to leverage video content more effectively is something I want to be very focused on.
Yeah, video, big thing. I experimented with TikTok, got like 50 views, and I'm like, okay, I'll try this later. so, and and kind of a PSA here, but it's interesting because you got some inbound interest from that seed round announcement. And for founders out there, I have a SaaS news site where we cover fundraising events, covered Myko's fundraising event. So email me. But anyway, that was really interesting. So you've raised 2.7 of a seed round, and tell us, this is really interesting. Usually the chronology of these are interesting because you had the previous product, you're pivoting. So where did it come, about we were thinking about the seed round? Was it, hey, we're going to pivot and we're going to raise, or let's try this pivot and then raise? Tell us about that.
Yeah. So candidly, we had been trying to fundraise for quite some time. Like we had struggled pretty significantly with fundraising from most of the large VC funds. We'd gotten turned down from a lot of investors over the course of the existing Genius Shoots product. And even as we kind of pivoted to the new, effectively the Myko product, the AI side, we were still getting turned down from lots of investors, but it was very clear that the sentiment had changed and that, we were much closer to where we needed to be. When we released that first version back in October, we took some time off. So it was a number of months where we really reset, tried to regroup, understand what wasn't working, what about the pitch needed to be redone, spent some more time also on traction, both like getting our waitlist signups and then getting the product to a really strong demoable point. And then we went back out and were able to wind up successfully raising, which still required a fair amount of luck to wind up getting a fund like Khosla. But we certainly were at it for quite some time.
Okay, and I appreciate you sharing that because we see all those fundraising events. It's like, hey, we raised this big round, but we don't know sometimes the pain behind the scenes. So with Khosla, do they have a tech focus within this space that you're after?
They have a very strong AI focus, broadly speaking. So Vinod has been an early investor in a lot of both recent AI companies, and then even he was one of the first investors in OpenAI. So the pitch, really the long-term pitch, I think resonated with him around what does the future of data and analytics looks like? Well, it probably looks like a little AI co-pilot sitting on your shoulder that knows you, knows what you're looking for, knows how to get you the data you need and how to analyze things to make better decisions, and then can even help you kind of push those actions and make those decisions. So the pitch, I think we're already primed to resonate with him because it's something very much in his wheelhouse. And then I think just they wound up being great conversation.
And so you tried to raise with Genius Seeds, was painful, didn't happen. Then Myko saw the sentiment change. So any lessons learned that you'd like to pass on to the SaaS community as far as your journey from Genius Seeds to Myko and anything that you learned in that process?
Yeah, one of the biggest things we learned was if you don't have a very robust Silicon Valley network, for lack of a better term, the fundraising environment and process is much different than for people who do. So we didn't have that network. We really weren't getting many warm introductions. Most of our conversations were cold outbound. The conversations and the difference is you really need significant traction on the product. So you need a product with real traction. So when you see these people that raise $5 million from a deck, candidly, most of them have connections to the investors. They have former bosses they worked with who got them lots of these warm introductions. And so their fundraising story is much different from what other people's fundraising stories looks like. So if you're one of those people that doesn't have a strong network of VCs or doesn't have a strong founder background necessarily, where you're going to be able to raise that like pre-deck round, really spending the time on figuring out a way to get an MVP in the market where you can showcase traction, showcase some early product market fit becomes a necessity and will make the process much easier.
So that, so I appreciate that because that almost, I thought about like, when say you lose your job and you're thrown out into the job market and didn't expect that, oh, now I've got to go find a job and network and all that stuff. And you start cold. So it sounds like the same thing, unless you have all the, big connection or connections and networks, you're just starting cold and it's really hard.
That's right. It's much harder cold. It's almost like a completely different process for people that do it that way versus the people who worked at, high flying startup that just raised a series D. Their boss is friends with all of the investors who's able to get them in the door. And it's not saying those people aren't worthy of getting those rounds. I mean, lots of those companies wind up succeeding because they are highly talented individuals. It's just that access to network difference is something that you don't fully appreciate when you're on the outside and makes the whole process much different.
Okay. Yeah. The great tips there. So at this stage of your business, Trevor, so pre-revenue, we got design partners, real revenue coming up. So maybe not a revenue metric or number focus, but do you have a number that you're focused on to guide the business right now?
The guiding metric really is around customer activation. So can we get people in the product, engaging with the product on a increasing basis where they are finding more and more value out of it and increasing the ways they use the product? I think revenue on the other side of that is like, how do we get people bought in, right? How do we show commitment to giving this a real try and making sure that we're finding the right people that we're focusing on to make happy? I think the real guiding metric is just how do we make sure that the customers we're onboarding are happy using the product and that we're solving that kind of pain point. And I think the natural evolution to where I imagine your next question is going, that's how we're thinking about what the next fundraise looks like of how can we show both like the technology that we've built works and is something differentiated. And then B, from the like customer attraction standpoint, how can we show what is that pain point that we're solving and what the go-to-market motion for that will look like? And I think once we have those really clearly fleshed out, I think that kind of becomes the next activation metric for we're ready for more capital.
Okay. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So, Trevor, really appreciate your time and sharing your experiences. And tell us what's coming up next for Myko.
Yeah, full go to market. So I'll be out there selling. I'm a sales team of one right now, but we're having a lot of fun, especially onboarding a lot of our next customers, planning to add a number of integrations as well. So we're connecting to Salesforce. We've got HubSpot coming out in the next week now that we've had so much demand from it from the fundraise announcement. And then continuing to add integrations and the other data warehouses, the Snowflakes, the Azures, the BigQuery. We've been onboarding and supporting customers with all of those. So really just getting some happy customers over the next couple of months, like keeps me excited.
Yeah, that's great. And we know, I mean, from my tech stack survey, in SaaS companies, at least, we know Salesforce and HubSpot dominate the CRM space, and then it's kind of the rest of the players. So, one, I want to throw one last question out here, and before we wrap up, and it was a question actually from a student in my SaaS Metrics course, where, and you may not be thinking about this yet, but when do you see the pivot from founder-led sales? Right, you're excited about your go-to-market motion, founder-led sales, and when would you pivot to then building out a sales team?
It's a great question and something I think about a lot, especially thinking about what is even the next sales hire. Is it like go to market person to really help me with demand gen where I can still hold most of the conversations? Or is it an SDR to just someone like brute force get lots of conversations? Or is it one of the more hybrid AEs who can both like help me close, get more of the demand? Jason Lemkin on SaaStr and Sam Blond talk about this a lot of like, you always want to hire two, whether it's an AE or SDR, so you can compare them, they can learn. I think the big thing for us is when do I become the roadblock of either not being able to drive the top of the funnel or B, the like mid to end funnel of actually closing the customers. I think once I very much become in the way, I think pulling the trigger on those next hires becomes critical.
I
So
think
yeah, I was just gonna, it's a long way of saying I don't know yet, but it's something that we're very much thinking about every day.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, interesting. It's hard to nail down, but you mentioned an important thing, I think, is when you become the roadblock, right? If you can't keep up with, say, demo demand, sales calls, proposals, then yeah, that could be a good time to think about it. So, Trevor, really enjoyed this conversation and sharing your experience from Genius Sheets and that big pivot to now Myko. If listeners would like to learn more about Myko, where should we send them online?
Yeah, so myko.ai, myko.ai.
Perfect. So if you'd like to learn more about Trevor and Myko, check out myko.ai. And again, Trevor, really enjoyed this conversation and thanks for your time today.
Thank you. This was great. Appreciate it.